Of course, in our Gospel of the Transfiguration today, we have this event where Peter says to Jesus, "It's good that we're here, and let me build 3 tents. One for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Now, I've never been to the Holy Land, but I'm told Mount Tabor is a very desert place, a high mountain, and not much to recommend it. So Jesus said to Peter, "Well, what about you? Shouldn't you build a tent for you here too?" And he said, "Oh, no, don't worry about that. The wife and kids and I have a nice place down by the lake." I'd like to say something a little bit more about our readings, the challenge of our Lenten experience, and where it leads us now. The readings. It's always the Transfiguration in the second Sunday of Lent. But our reading from Genesis about Abram, it's not Abraham yet. This is very much about a promise that God makes to Abram, but it doesn't evolve yet into the response. It leads to the transformation of the heart and experience of our forefather in faith to become Abraham. And so there's a great promise made that you will be a great nation. People will come forth, and it will be significant. And it is. It is for Christians. It is for Jews. It is for Muslims. Abraham is the father in faith, the one whose righteous act really set the path forward for us in our privileged encounter with God. And so we know that it plays itself out in the possible sacrifice of Isaac, which doesn't occur, which again is a transformation. It is believed that in Ur, the people practiced child sacrifice. And so God is overturning that when he will not allow Isaac to be sacrificed. To say there is a new way. And yes, it will be about pre-shadowing the sacrifice of the Son, his Son, that we might live and have hope and resurrection. But it's turning over the tradition to bring about something new. An invitation and an encounter of the heart between Abram becoming Abraham in a new place and in a new way. The Transfiguration. Of course, it is about Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. Moses representing the law, Elijah the greatest of the prophets, and Jesus the fulfillment of both. That something new is happening. Something is inbreaking in our world, satisfying our thirst for God, inviting us into an experience where we no longer long, but encounter God. It is not particularly the case, as most would say, even though it is worded this way, that the change was so great in Jesus. If Jesus is the fullness of the experience of God in the flesh, then this reality is present at all times. But something happened in the vision of those disciples, of Peter, James, and John. They saw something different. They saw God in an unexpected and new way. And it left them speechless. It left them afraid. And of course, whenever we present our fears before God, God's response is always the same. Calming us, lifting us up, and inviting us to look, to see God face to face as God is. The question of the Transfiguration, I think, and transformation is always upon us. In what ways are we being called to be transfigured? Just as Peter and James and John were, maybe only for that short time. And then, of course, the message from the cloud. "Behold, this is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." You may be aware in Matthew what happens again at the baptism, and the cloud appears again, and the same thing is said. "This is my beloved, in whom I am well pleased." Well, you've been baptized. You've been washed clean and invited into a profound relationship with God. That means you too are the beloved, in whom God is well pleased. And it's about grace. As we get in the second reading, it's not about the works and what you did. It's about a plan of God. And we are to recall our own creation in the image and likeness of God. that this day we too are transformed into the beloved and are able to share that with others. So I don't know how your counting goes and whether you count Sundays or not or whatever, but it's basically 12 days since Ash Wednesday. So the question might be, for us of a certain generation at a certain time, well, what did you give up and how is it going? I'm going to steal about what I'm going to say now basically from Jim Martin, so you may have seen it there. It's also what I shared on Ash Wednesday with the community at Blakefield. So what is it you really want from Lent? What's the goal at the end? Regardless of what you're doing or not doing, or forgotten, or whatever, what is it you hope for? I mean, you obviously aware that Lent and Advent are sort of tied together. Advent, though, for me at least, has a very different feel. Maybe that's the weather. Maybe that's that lights go up early in lots of places, and we're already anticipating with such fervor, and plus the commercialization that leads to Christmas. Well, nobody's figured out yet how to bottle the desert in sin. So since that's the case, Lent feels a little bit longer, not just because of the calendar. And so we're invited into the desert. We're invited into deeper reflection. We're invited, yes, into the three great things of prayer and almsgiving and fasting. To get to what? Well, to get to 9 p.m. on the Easter Vigil out there with the fire, where we proclaim Christ our light. And it transforms us again into Easter people. People who have journeyed. People who are aware of suffering. And now, in fullness of grace, celebrate with Easter joy. That's the end point. Or a step along the way in the journey, more precisely. So with Lent, how is it we go about transforming our hearts? That we get this spiritual vision to see again. The basic idea is clear. Be kind. Be kind. Be kind. Everything in our world and our experience invites us to be something other than that. Be kind. Well, that's kind of abstract and it's sort of out there. And when you're certainly preaching to sixth graders at Loyola Blakefield, that's not going to cut it very long. So what's that look like concretely? Number one, in the words of Jim Martin, don't be a jerk. Being a jerk means I'm having a bad day, my back hurts, I just got cut off, this happened and that happened, and let me share it with you. Because we have burdens and there are crosses in our life should not become a cross for someone else. Don't be a jerk. They were able to relate to that also. So it clearly is a generational spanning item. Don't be a jerk. Secondly, honor absence. Do not speak in any way negatively about those who aren't present. Honor absence. Don't let it tear apart the community. Don't let it break things apart. Seems simple enough. Lastly, comes very much out of Ignatian spirituality. Give others the benefit of the doubt. The plus sign, as they say. So when someone does something to you that really is irritating, and I know that never happens in your life, only in mine, or upsetting, or even angering, give them the benefit of the possibility that something good could have been meant, or indeed they are struggling on their journey. And these ways help us to be kind. They're ways that we can know that we're making progress in being kind, other than just someone stating, be kind. All for one reason. To fulfill that thirst and longing that is our theme for this Lent. To transform our hearts. That we really can be different people than we were 12 days ago, and then we will be on that April night or that Easter morning. When we're filled with that hope and that longing and that thirst are met. And that part of our Lenten journey should be very much around the Transfiguration. Where are we to see God that we are not seeing God now? In our world, in others, in community, in suffering, and in brokenness. We're invited to that encounter, that our hearts might be changed, that we can make new openness, that God can enter in. And when that happens, we'll be given the promise of Abraham. We will be blessed and invited into covenant and told again that you are the beloved daughter, the beloved son, in whom I am well pleased. Indeed, happy Lent.